The history of delay effects is ultimately a history of audio recording. A story of human desire, that something as ephemeral and fleeting as a sound could be captured, held, even but for a moment, to be heard again, and again, and perhaps even again. Roland Boss have been making delay and echo effects since the 1970s, adopting every advancement in technology, culminating in their latest offering, the compact pedal format Dual Digital Delay, a modern, fully DSP love letter to the iconic Roland SDE-3000 rack unit, a game-changing early digital delay from 1983. That's the same rack unit that birthed the Boss DD2 and the lineage of DD pedal updates over the years that many guitarists will already be familiar with. With so many delay options, you might be wondering why this exists and where it fits into the sonic picture. So allow me to quickly ascend the family tree. Let's go back in time to the 1970s and figure out how we got to this. This is a tape recorder. It's taking my voice, converted to an analog electric signal by this microphone, and storing it as a magnetic pattern on the magnetically sensitive tape, feeding around its reels. By simply rewinding the tape, I can let the playback head convert the magnetic pattern on the tape back into an electric signal, and we can listen to what I said as many times as we like. And we can listen to what I said as many times as we like. This tape machine is from 1974, which just so happens to be the same year that Roland brought out the Space Echo, a dedicated tape echo effect which used a loop of tape and multiple playback heads spaced out at varying distances to record audio sources and play them back multiple times at selectable speeds and intervals. I don't have a Space Echo, but with a little trickery, I can create a similar tape echo effect using my tape recorder. The Space Echo was hugely successful and is still widely considered to be possibly the best tape echo unit ever produced. However, large, heavy, mechanical and expensive tape echo units aren't exactly practical for the road. But in the early 1970s, there was no other option. Tape was the most advanced commercial method of capturing sound. But perhaps capture isn't strictly necessary. All we really need to do is impede sound's transit. We need to delay it arriving at output. But how does one delay a sound? It is impossible to permanently capture a continuously changing signal using basic analog electrical components. The closest we can get is using one of these. This is a capacitor, a device that can store electronic charge, but only for one static voltage point. However, if you get a long enough line of these capacitors and take samples of the signal often enough, then you can store a sequence of voltages which could be reconstructed back into a copy of the original signal. However, the capacitor line can't see all of time at once, so it has to capture the voltage points one at a time for an incoming signal and pass each captured voltage down the line. How quickly each pass happens and how many capacitors there are in the chain will determine how delayed this signal copy is compared to the live signal. These are Bucket Brigade devices, or BBDs for short. Boss used them in both their 1978 DM1 and for their first compact delay pedal, the DM2, released in 1981. Strictly speaking, the DM1 used a CCD, a charge-coupled device, a more advanced, specialised version of a BBD, which you might be more familiar with if you are into digital cameras. CCDs are used as sensor components in digital imaging. These analog delays didn't quite have the same fidelity as tape, nor were they capable of delay times much over 300 milliseconds without severely limiting the frequency bandwidth, and limitations of sample rates and capacitor numbers meant that high-frequency information was often lost, making the delay repeats sound dark. But despite this, they were very popular. Their limitations gave them a unique sound, and being offered in a compact, transportable format was a significant advantage over mechanical tape echo units. And at this point, you might be thinking, Colin, this fully analog technology that you're talking about, with sampling rates, thousands of storage capacitors, switching transistors, and signal reconstruction, sounds suspiciously like the way digital audio recording works today. And you know what? You're not far off. At the time when Bucket Brigade and charge-coupled devices were being developed in the late 60s, digital audio recording was very much on the horizon. People could see it coming. They were figuring out how it would function, but the technology to achieve it was still largely out of reach. In many ways, CCDs were the testing ground for what would become digital methodology. Development of those capacitor chain technologies were the vital stepping stones towards a new paradigm shift in the capture of sound. By 1983, the digital audio revolution had truly begun. Compact discs were the cool new audio format that encoded music digitally. Big artists with the record labels that could afford it were beginning to record songs, at least in part using digital methods, but not without some problems and setbacks. We weren't quite at the point of throwing out the Studers for the DAWs just yet. Reliable digital recording done entirely in DAW was still a decade away. Pro Tools wouldn't even be released until 1991, but it was clear in the early 80s that digital was not only the future, but the now of audio. 1983 was the year that Roland released the SDE-3000, a rack-mount digital delay unit which utilised a proprietary microprocessor, a 64-pin CMOS-based gate array chip, capable of interfacing with multiple chips of DRAM and finally offering what no analog delay technology had been capable of before: control. It suddenly became possible to dial in delay to the desired millisecond, use a foot switch to tap the target tempo, save and store several preset sounds to be accessed at any time, and of course, with enough memory it was possible to increase both the delay time and the fidelity of those longer repeats, far in excess of what you could do conventionally or cost effectively using fully analog solutions. Roland's SD3000 broke huge ground in offering musicians and studio engineers the option of precise repeats, high fidelity sounds, and a feature set that could not have been imagined without digital control. But it didn't do all of that perfectly. This might come as a surprise to people more familiar with modern DSP, but these vintage digital units had signal paths that were still largely analog. The original dry signal stays analog throughout. Much of the audio processing and filtering is done in the analog realm. It's only the repeat generation that is digitized. In fact, while vastly more complex in execution, the basic topology of the SD3000 is mostly similar to the analog Bucket Brigade delays that came before. Even the LFO that controlled the rate of digital sampling was analog, which introduced slight variances in the sample rate. This, alongside other frequency-dependent analog processes, meant that these digital repeats had all the tiny modulation, timing, and tonal quirks of an analog system. SD3000 retained many of the imperfections that made guitarists fall in love with the sound of analog effects in the first place, and unsurprisingly, there was a huge desire to have this studio rack unit miniaturized into a pedal format. Perhaps by luck, or more likely by design, the 64-pin CMOS processor chip Boss developed was just the right size to fit width-wise inside their compact pedal enclosures. It can't have been easy to strip down the rest of the rack technology to get something that would run off of 9 volts, fit inside the enclosure, and still sound good. Boss had to throw out a lot of the original features and flexibilities to make it work, but the final result was the DD2, the world's first pedal format digital delay. This white pedal has been through a number of revisions over the years, updating every time the technology became cheaper or a more advanced version was available, adding more delay time and features as they became technologically possible. The modern versions are no longer using the original long chip and have moved over to being fully DSP, with long delay times, deep feature sets, and all the fancy stuff you'd expect from modern tech. Which brings us back to this, the Dual Digital Delay. This is everything the DD2 wanted to be. This is the SDE rack unit miniaturized with all technological restraints removed. This runs two delay lines in tandem, which can be arranged either as a stereo pair or combined into one mono delay line with double the delay time. It retains the tap tempo, modulation and foot switch control of the rack unit, while also going further, adding MIDI and expression pedal control, and having a host of options and modes not immediately apparent from looking at the face of the pedal. If you want to know everything this pedal does, I've linked the official Boss documentation below. There you can learn more about setting this up for wet-dry outputs or ping-pong delay, along with all the options for expression and foot switch control. However, I want to focus on the pedal as it comes out of the box. We have level, feedback and time for controlling the delay. Depth and rate for modulation on the repeats. A high rate and shallow depth give an extremely subtle tape echo flutter, which adds an organic quality to the digital precision. Extreme depth settings can achieve the illusion of repeats continuously ascending or descending in pitch. High cut filters out high frequencies, darkening the repeats to further emulate the sound of older analog delays. Then we get to the most interesting part of the pedal for me, the offset knob. This lets you add a small time offset to the dual delay lines. Note that this is not trying to be two completely separate delays with different time settings. What this achieves is the flam of the left and right delays not landing exactly in time. Pushing it further, there are 8th and dotted 8th note divisions for rhythmic delays with an unmarked section between them, which gives just enough separation between the two delay lines to emulate the sound of multiple playback heads on an old tape echo unit. Stereo ins make it so easy to use this delay in conjunction with other 80s rack-inspired pedals like the Boss Dimension C. This pairing is just incredible. If you're looking for a couple of effects to run in post to give your guitars a touch of 80s magic, then these are they. I'll play you out with some sounds, but remember to wear your headphones as these will all be in stereo. And if you decide you like the sounds of the Boss Dual Digital Delay, then you'll find purchase links in the description of this video. That's all for now. Keep it loud and stay safe.